Hey, welcome back to ZK MasterTech. Today we're going to cover part 3 of the S780 combine inspection. Hope you guys enjoyed part 1 and part 2. In part 3 we're going to cover the right hand side of the machine, and then I'll take you up into the engine compartment, and then we'll do the grain tank, and then we'll do the unload augers. And in the video you're going to see this combine has an S-Series tailboard trash tube put on it to help clean the top of the tailboard. And I'll put a link in the video, and I'm also going to put a link in the description down below. It'll take you to the Sloan Express website, and then I'll also post a link in the description of a YouTube video that Sloan Express actually covered on the trash tube. Let's check it out. Okay, so now we're here on the right hand side of the chopper. Here we have our def dosing pump here, and this is where the filter is, and you want to change that guy every 3,000 hours or so. I mean, some guys can do it sooner than that. You know, it's pretty easy to change. It's right here. You just turn this canister and drop it down and replace the filter. But, you know, at minimum 3,000 hours on this filter here. And we'll check the, condition of the lights. Of course we did that on the other side too. And here's our fuel supply line from the fuel tank. Make sure that it looks good and all the clamps are in place. We got the wiring, for your chopper speed sensor. And, I checked this is a chopper bearing behind here, but I didn't show it on film, but I lifted up on the rotor inside here and checked these bearings on there. And then, of course, we're going to take a pry bar. This is our right hand rear chaffer swing arm. Move it. So it's good. Checking my seal gap. I wanted to show this trash tube. You can get this from Sloan's Express, and it mounts onto the vacuum fan, and this is where the discharge air is coming from the vacuum fan here. You can see this, there's a fan right here, and what that thing's doing is it is sucking air from the rotary screen. So the dirt and stuff that falls down from the rotary screen, and also from the engine air pre-cleaner, it's got a hose going to the bottom of it, and it's taking that dirty air, sucking it into here, and then it's coming back here and it's discharging here. But there used to not be, a stock machine has nothing here, it's just a hole, and then it would blow and kind of circulate in here, and then a bunch of trash would just settle on top of this tailboard, and I've seen it clear up to here before. So what this trash tube does is that it directs the airflow more directly across this tailboard, and there will be virtually nothing sitting on top of this tailboard whenever you run one of those trash tubes. And then, also I was talking about those holes up here that get knocked out, and if you don't have those covered and you got holes there, then extra material is going to blow down on top of here, and then if you didn't have that trash tube, it would just accumulate and accumulate. So you can get those from Sloan's Express, and I think they work great. So here we have the fuel sediment bowl, and during a service we would take this bowl off and clean this bowl out and make sure there's no water in the fuel. You'll be able to see it here as well. And we want to make sure that this cob deflector door, I should say, works properly, that this spring pin goes in and out, and you can either run in the bean or the corn position. So here we got the vacuum fan drive, which is running off a jack shaft that is also attached to the accessory drive belt of the engine, running off the crankshaft. And we want to check the condition of this idler here. That one likes to go out, and check the condition of this belt. And then also while you're in here, you can kind of view the bottom of the alternators. There's 2 alternators, and then you got the AC compressor here, and we can get up in there and check for leaks. But there's a bracket right here, this bracket right here. And I don't know, it's hard to maybe see on camera, but there's a crack that runs through that bracket. And that's what's holding up this huge accessory drive that's also bolted to the front of the engine. But it's cracked right there, and it's also missing a bolt. So we need to fix that, probably put a new bracket on it and get bolts in there. But you know, we also need to check the engine mounts and the main engine gear case mounts and make sure everything's hunky-dory there. But it's pretty common to see this bracket cracked like that, and possibly both bolts missing. But you want to make sure you fix that, because if it's got nothing holding it on, it'll break the bolts that it's attaching it to the engine, and then this whole accessory drive will get cocked and throw all the belts off, and it's kind of a mess. So you definitely want to fix that. And then this is the right hand side discharge beater bearing, and we'll pry up on that and make sure it's not loose and it sounds good when we roll it. And it's got a speed sensor as well. So now that we're on the right hand side, I want to talk a little bit about the upgraded components that you have versus, a 600 series into a 700 series, and then also some of the differences you have between a 7 class and an 8 class machine. The first difference I'll talk about on an 8 class machine, we have a tailings elevator here with a rethresher. So inside of this here, it kind of looks like a mini feed accelerator. So on a 7 class machine, the tailings elevator kind of runs like this, and then it brings the tailings material and pushes it back in here, right above, like right in there in that area. And then it has to be rethreshed by the rotor. So, that's taking up capacity. So what we do on an 8 class machine is we have a rethresher unit here, and it brings the tailings, it's still getting it from the same spot down here, but it's bringing it up with a paddle chain, and it throws it into here. And then there's a small little rethresher in here, and then it has, an adjustable concave in here, but we always leave it in the corn position because this is for wheat or small grain. So we always leave it in that position. It rethreshes it, and then it drops it down into here, and that's where that auger is that we've seen on the other side. And it brings the tailings material and then drops it onto the return pan, so we can drop it back over the shoe and then re-clean it over the shoe. So that allows us to have a little bit more capacity on a 8 class machine, but we have some extra components in order to do that. Also, we have some belts and drive pulleys that have been upgraded in the past. So this long belt here that wiggles its way all the way around, well, it drives the shoe here. So it's driving those pitman arms. It also drives the cleaning fan. This is a variable speed cleaning fan. So on a 700 series, you've got a different actuator here, because with interactive combine adjust, the combine is adjusting the cleaning fan speed up and down, and they had to change the actuator in order to do that quicker. So we've got an upgraded actuator on here, but we upgraded to a double rib belt instead of a single rib belt, which is what we had in the past. And then we also have a double ribbed solid belt here, which we used to run just, 2 separate belts, and we had issues with those coming off and stuff. So that's some stuff that's been upgraded on the, well, they started doing that in like the latest serial model 600 series, and then they carried it over into the 700s. And another difference, in the 700 series is now we have cameras mounted on the elevators. So these things right here are cameras. And what it's doing, this is our moisture sensor. So it's bringing in a sample and then it's taking a picture of it. And then the computer can detect, you know, different stuff that's not supposed to be in there, you know, trash, broken kernels, you know, you name it. It can basically detect a good sample versus a bad sample, and then the machine on its own can make adjustments. So, you know, it can adjust the threshing clearance, the rotor speed, the cleaning fan speed, the chaffer and the sieve elements. It can change all that on the fly just by, you know, taking pictures of the clean grain, and we're taking pictures of the tailings as well here. So using all that information, I'm not going to get into a whole lot of that. I'm just telling you, you know, the 700 series has interactive combine adjust too, which adds these cameras on the elevators. And then of course, you know, it's communicating to this GQM, which is a grain quality module. And then, you know, that's broadcasting its information on the CAN bus to all the other controllers. So this combine is able to adjust itself going through the field. And also on these cameras, you can view the camera feed from inside the cab on the display. And I might do another video later, you know, further explaining Combine Advisor and Interactive Combine Adjust, because that's a whole nother thing in itself. I'm just mainly doing, you know, an inspection video. This is, you know, what I do during inspection. I can't really go over, you know, how everything works on this machine. There's just too much. So we'll do that later. I'm just going to cover, you know, the basics, you know, the belts, bearings, chains, augers, you know, stuff like that. So when we have this rethresher, of course, we're going to have some more components. So we have a paddle chain inside here that we need to inspect. And what we did is I took this belt off here. So this is your rear right-hand countershaft belt. I just undid the spring tensioner and then take this belt off the top pulley, and then you can rotate this belt, turn this big pulley, and it'll actually rotate both elevators at the same time. Then we can also inspect the belt on the clean grain, which drives this, and then we can also inspect the belt back here. It's hard to see, but it drives the tailings elevator and the rethresher. And then we also need to inspect this drive chain here. There's usually a shield that rides right here, and this chain here, we generally replace it either every year or every other year. It gets a lot of wear on it and it gets sloppy loose, and if she gets loose enough, it can come off and damage other components. So and we also replace these idlers here and here every time we change this chain. If you don't, it'll bite you in the butt. So we check that, make sure the chain's good. You got the tensioner is right here for that chain. And then also, I won't be able to really show you, get in there very well. And there is a slip clutch on the back side here. And there's a grease zerk, and there's, you know, a belt that goes around it. And we check and make sure that that all looks good in there as well. We come in here on this side and we check the separator grates on this side of the rotor. We also check the hardware for the concave on this side. This is the, you know, attaching hardware for the concaves. We make sure all these clips and pins are all where they need to be. And then we check the condition of the shoe augers inside of there as well. So here we're looking at the bottom of the clean grain elevator. You can see that this has a different chain than what comes in them. It's got a poly paddles, and this is a precision chain because you have to run this certain chain when you have a precision yield monitor, and that's what he's got in here. One thing I did see is this seal on this bearing is out and loose in there, so we need to change the bearing. We'll check the auger condition, which it's not sharp. One thing you want to make sure is that the outer diameter of the flighting is not worn down enough to where it can't feed enough grain from the bottom sump here into the elevator. So sometimes I'll change those augers out when they get kind of small or the flighting on the end gets really sharp. Also, it's hard to see it, but there you can see this divider in here has been welded before, and it kind of looks like Ray Charles welded it with his feet, but these dividers will crack across right here, and that's why this one's been welded on. But it's not a real easy area to get in there and weld unless you remove the chain, and you know, this is all stainless material and it doesn't MIG very well sometimes, so it's difficult to weld that and make it look pretty and nice. So sometimes just getting some tacks on there will keep that crack from growing across and actually losing that divider, which is a bad deal because then you have to replace this whole lower boot. And then we also rotated down here, and it really helps to have a second person rotate that belt and then have someone down here watching. And you know, of course, we just mark the paddles so we know where we started, and then we're checking every single paddle, we're checking every chain length and make sure it's got all the cotter pins or S-hooks if they've got the S-hooks in there, making sure that's all where it needs to be. And then of course we're checking the divider up in here and make sure it's not broke or missing. I've seen, you know, this piece in here just be broke off and gone, so we want to make sure that that's in good condition as well. You can also, these doors can get thin right here in here on this clean grain, and you can just tell by pushing on it. You know, when you get one that's thin, it just feels like a pop can right here. And then, you know, of course, it's time to replace the door. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the change adjustment here. So you want this chain, when it's adjusted, you want it to be able to slide back and forth on the bottom of the sprocket, but not to be able to pull away from it. So in order to adjust the chain, you're using this bolt up here to bring this bearing housing up and down, which lifts or lowers the auger into this chain, adjusting the tension on this chain. And same goes for the tailings elevator. And then also, you know, we got a tailings auger as well, and we inspect that. So here there's a door. You can take down this refresher to look at this return auger in here. So here we're gonna check the bearing on the other side of the cleaning fan. Stick a good bar in there, pick up on it, visually inspect it. It's also a good idea to go ahead and grease it while you're looking at it and see if the grease is squirting out of the flange or if it's going through the bearing. So you want it to go through the bearing and fill this bearing out instead of just squeaking out the side. And then also we have, you know, the cleaning fan shivs and springs and stuff that we look at. Look in here, make sure that the grease seals are in good shape here, that it's been greased. If you question it, you could always, you know, take this apart and separate the shivs and look inside there. And also there's, you know, there's 3 like pins that go through each pulley. And sometimes those holes can get wallered out on there. I don't think this machine's got enough hours to worry about that yet. And then we're going to take a bar. This is where the shoe drive is on the right hand side, and we'll check the drive shaft bearing, the pitman bearings like I talked about before. And then of course we're going to check this side on our shaker arms. So we got our main chaffer and return pan shaker arm. It's all one piece here. We're looking at those bushings, and also we'll check the front sieve arm here as well. And then we're gonna check the seal gap here, make sure we're not, you know, biased left or right, make sure, you know, our seal gaps are good from left to right. So here I took the cover off the top of the refresher. It's just this plate, and there's 2 bolts that hold it on, and then you can easily come in here and look at the upper sprocket, you know, the divider up here, and then you can look at this refresher in here. Look at all the bars on it. So while you're up here, you know, checking that top door. It's also good time to check this rotary screen jack shaft. So the rotary screen's getting driven from this jack shaft, which has got a belt here that we can check going to the engine crankshaft. So we're going to check these bearings, check the belt, the tensioner, everything like that. And also we can kind of get another peek at our belt going around the alternators. We can check some of these grounds and our hoses up here. Way up in here we've got our cylinder for our grain tank covers. That's what moves those covers in and out up there. Make sure it's not leaking. Check these hoses out. So here, more towards the front, the right-hand counter shaft. You know, we'll check this main counter shaft bearing and the drive shaft that runs across the main counter shaft. It goes into the back of the 5-speed gear case. I just changed this belt recently, so it's brand new. Also, on all these spring-loaded tensioners, you want to make sure that the cotter pins are in good condition. If you keep having cotter pins get worn through and coming off, this tensioner, you can kind of shove it up through the hole more, and you can add more washers in there to keep it tighter, basically, against that cotter pin, so it's not rubbing in and out and wearing those cotter pins out. But you got one here and one there. You also got another one here. And the way that this tensioner rod is on this new 700 series is in a different spot. It used to run through here and then into the back side of this idler pulley, but now they got it mounted over here. Okay, now we're jumping up in the engine compartment. We're going to check this rotary screen here. And what this does is it turns and it keeps all the dust and debris from going into the coolers. You know, if this thing stops moving, those coolers will get plugged up pretty quickly. And then it's got a belt and idlers and a tensioner. And that's where that rotary screen jack shaft's poking out there at the bottom. So we'll check all that. Here we'll open the screen door up and we can get a better look in here. Our radiator here is the bottom section, and then we've got an oil cooler and a after cooler for the turbo, and then we've got our fuel coolers and air conditioning condensers, and then we have a propeller here, and that spins. And it's got a little bit of play there in the bearing, or possibly the bearings are just loose on the little step shaft. And you got to be vigilant on checking this propeller, because if those bearings can go out, this propeller can wear into these coolers. And you know, you've got $11,000 here worth of coolers that you want to protect, so you want to make sure that that propeller doesn't get into there. So you want to check that whenever you can. You can see how much wobble that's got, but it's not close to getting into the coolers yet. But they make a updated style mount here. You can see there's a bolt sticking through. So there's a bolt that goes all the way through the coolers, and then there's a little hub that threads onto that bolt, and then you've got bearings that slide on with a snap ring. Well, the new style has a shorter bolt, so then you can put a bolt from the outside in with some spacers to hold that bearing on a little tighter, so it doesn't have that movement that we're seeing. So we'll probably try to upgrade to that. Here we have our def tank, and we want to make sure that the tank's not being sucked in. And, that's a sign of the vent back here being plugged. See, right back here, this guy right here is our vent. You want to make sure that is clean, and here's our vent for our fuel tank as well. We want to make sure that that stays clean. And then we check all the lines. You know, there's coolant and def going in and out of this header at the top, so we want to make sure we're not leaking anywhere around in there. That looks good. Here we have our pre-cleaner and our air cleaner for the engine. And I did notice that here's our coolant tank on top, and our coolant level is low, and that's why that message was coming on earlier. So we need to make sure we check this thing over for leaks. If we can't find anything, then we'll go ahead and we'll put a pressure tester here, and we'll put 15 psi air pressure on it and see if we can't find the leak or see if it bleeds down. So here's our engine air filter. And it's pretty dirty. I mean, that's typical. Normally guys change these every year anyway. And we have our secondary filter in here. You want to change that every other outer filter change. But you can tell it still looks pretty clean. I'm not sure when it has been replaced. There's no hours written on it. But the customer services this thing himself, so I'm sure he'll deal with that filter. So here we have the engine bay door open, and another difference between a 7 class and 8 class machine is you jump up to a larger engine. On this 780 we have a 13.5 liter final tier 4 engine. It's got twin turbos on it. We got a fixed turbo that's feeding a variable geometry turbo. And we'll check the turbo actuator here, make sure that linkage moves up and down. We'll check the whole engine over, looking for leaks. Check all the clamps, the wiring harness. We're going to check the belts on the front here. We need to check that lower radiator hose, make sure it's not seeping. Here's the upper radiator hose. And here is the AGR cooler down there. So this is the air pipe going to that after treatment air filters there. We just need to move this ladder up so we can open this door, get into the fuel filters and oil filters, and we'll check the oil. Here is our main hydraulic reservoir, and you want to check this with the feeder house all the way down, which we already do. You want it halfway to 3/4, somewhere in there in the sight gauge. Right here, if you take this cap off, you've got a main hydraulic filter, and I like to change those every 600 hours. And then down here, this is on the back side of the engine, we have a main engine gear case. That also, it runs our separator drive. It's got a drive shaft that runs up to the 5-speed to turn it. Then we have a hydrostatic pump that's being driven off the main engine gear case, and then of course off the back of that was that main hydraulic pump that I talked about earlier. But we have a dipstick right here to check the oil on the main engine gear case, and it just takes high guard, which is hydraulic oil, same as the main reservoir here takes high guard as well. We'll look at the top of the after treatment enclosure, looking for soot leaks, checking all this wiring here that are going to the NOx sensors and temperature sensors, which wraps clear around here. And that all looks good. So here we got that door open, and we're going to check. Here's our oil filter, here's our fuel filters, and we'll check the engine oil level. We're going to look this thing over for any leaks. And here's our water pump right here, and we're looking for coolant leaks there. I'm maybe seeing a little residue down there, but nothing is wet. It's like dried residue. Well, you can kind of see maybe that lower radiator hose has been seeping maybe when it gets really cold. But here's our ECU here. All that looks good. All the exhaust manifold, check it for any leaks or soot built up in there. And I'm not seeing anything. All looks good in here. I'm gonna climb down in here into the hole of doom. One thing I wanted to talk about here is that the vent for the main engine gear case is coming off of this hose right here, and it's going to a plate on top of the main engine gear case. On these newer combines, they remotely mounted the rattle cap vent up here. Normally they're mounted right behind this light, and sometimes the rattle cap is tied up against this frame, and if that cap's not able to move freely, it can get clogged and cause an issue with the gear case not ventilating properly. If that gear case can't ventilate properly, the transmission will get starved of oil, which then you can burn out your clutches in there and the transmission can start slipping. So this one has actually been moved to the outside here. I don't know if you can see this right here. Can you see where my finger is? Yep. So you can, if you're concerned about it, you know, hitting the frame, you can remotely mount it here and make sure that this is clean. You want to keep this clean so that ProDrive system can circulate oil properly. If it can't vent, it can't circulate oil properly. And then while we're down here, I'm going to check this coupler here for the primary universal shaft. Then the U-joint, wiggle on it. I can check the back side of the engine for any coolant leaks, fuel leaks. It all looks good. Turn around here. See, they have a ton of room back here for a Sasquatch like me to move around. I probably showed it on, you know, some of my other videos, but there is a dipstick for your 2-speed rotor gear case down here that you want to pull out and check. It's got a 7/8 hex on it, and we'll pull that out and check the oil level on that gear case as well. And then there is a greaser on this black shiv here. It's called a torque sensing unit. You know, it's got a big heavy spring in there that's putting pressure on this rotor belt so it can have traction and it can expand and retract properly. And you want to get a bar in there and pry on that shiv and make sure it's tight on the shaft coming out of the gear case. And then while we're back here, we can check the hose connections, the clamps, make sure that's all good. We can look at the alternators, the AC compressor a little better from the top here. And we can check that rotary screen belt. And you want to make sure that the alignment is correct on those. And that all looks good. Except for that engine bracket down there that's broken. Can't really see anything wrong with any of the engine mounts. Look good. Checking the mounts for the main engine gear case. Looking them over. That looks good. Starter relay connections, starter connections. That looks good. Good. So you want to get in your body in the most uncomfortable position possible. And then you can get down in here and get this dipstick out of this gear case. But you don't want to flip it, because I've seen these dipstick tubes actually be separated from the cap, and that little dipstick tube be broke off and be down inside that gear case rattling around. So you want to make sure that it's there. The oil level looks good on it. We'll wipe it off once, we'll stick it back in, check it. She's right on the money. Okay, so now that they're in the grain tank and we got light, you know, as bright as the sun in her face, which is nice to be able to see, but it's a little hot. That sounds awesome. And we're checking this tube for, you know, excessive wear, but it's starting to wear through right here. When I look from the inside, you can see it's wearing through the tube. It does have a new auger in there. Also, one thing you want to check and make sure that this bearing still here is straight and it's not bowed out. Whenever it gets bowed out, then you lose how much you're into the driver on the gear case in there, and the fountain auger can eventually slip. And if this quits turning, then that will basically lock up with corn in the top of the elevator, and you know, can either slip the belt or snap the belt or wad up the chain, one of those things. So you want to make sure that this auger is being seated properly into the driver. So this tube's getting pretty thin. Look at that. Can you see that?
Yeah.
It's pretty thin in here. She's ran a lot of bushels through her. Down here we have active yield sensors in the grain tank, and they kind of work by black magic, but basically it's measuring the weight and kind of the, I don't know, the density maybe is a good word, I don't know, in the grain tank. So it uses those sensors to calculate yield. You know, that's the basic simple answer of that. So this unit here has a power fold pin extension. So, you know, we have all these linkages and arms and everything that's all tied back to that cylinder that we talked about earlier. And that one cylinder's got to be able to turn one shaft, and then all of this is connected together to where it'll fold this in, and then it lowers and raises this fountain auger too. So in order to drop this fountain auger down, you know, we used to just have latches up here that we just undo 2 latches and throw this auger down, but now we've got this rod here that we got to take out, and there's a pin down here, and there's like a chain too. We'll take off this rod, so we just unbolt this chain, and then we can take this pin out, and then we can drop this fountain auger so we can look inside here. When this is properly adjusted, you should be able to turn this pin. You know, it should have just a slight drag on the pin. If it's too tight, then it can cause an issue binding up when this thing's trying to fold. A lot of times, you know, guys will say that, you know, the bin extension won't fold or unfold. You know, it could just be as simple as an adjustment here on this rod. Also, we have an adjustment here on this eye bolt that adjusts how far it seats into the top of the elevator here. And we want to make sure that you clamp it down to where the fountain auger housing, the tube, just touches, and then half a turn after that, and that's all you need. So pin out here, and you just take this knee, shove it in, and then it's got a gash strut to help it go down.
Well, that's like niftier than before.
Now we got this drop down. We can look at our driver on our loading auger gear case here, aka fountain auger. And then we look at the teeth. So on a power fold option, you've got 4 teeth on the bottom of your auger, but you only got 1 driver tooth on your driver. That's so this thing can fold in and out and always be able to engage into that driver. And then in here, we look at our top sprocket. And this one has a precision sensor on top of the elevator, which is, you know, aftermarket. And one thing I did notice is the top of this elevator is missing a huge chunk of steel right here. It's broke out. So I've already aware that. We've seen that earlier when we did a previous repair on the combine, and the customer's just going to have that welded back up, so we'll get that fixed back up. And then also that top sprocket, I mean, it's starting to hook a little bit. It's not completely toast at the moment. I mean, I'd say that is in the yellow category. It could run another year. Also, there's this plastic block down in there. You want to make sure that that thing is in there and not missing. And then we'll look inside the rest of the elevator, look for holes or any places where it possibly worn through. And then here we have the Deere mass flow sensor, so it's getting hit with crop, grain, and pushing on this sensor, and then, you know, it uses that into its calculation for yield as well. But he's using the precision monitor instead, so it's not even being used. But you want to make sure that mass flow sensor is good. Sometimes when guys are running in down corn, you'll bring a lot of mud up into here, and then this will get packed full of mud, and then that mass flow sensor won't work like it's supposed to. And over here on the side of the elevator, we have a dipstick to check the oil for the loading auger gear case here, and it just takes GL5 gear oil. And while we're up here, you know, we're going to check all the linkages and the pillow blocks for the folding mechanism for the grain tank covers. Inspected the cross augers, look at the flighting on those, and then, you know, I don't know if I filmed it or not. On the other side, I lift up on the sprockets and the bearings on this other side to check the bearings. On the cross augers itself, I thought I'd mention that. I'm not sure if I showed it or not. There's a lot of stuff to check on this combine. It's hard to get it all on film, but I'm doing the best I can. So we have checked everything in the grain tank. This glass door was loose. The latches weren't attached, so I went ahead and attached that for him. And we do have a problem with when this tank folds down, the covers aren't fully seating down all the way. We're just gonna have to get this thing outside where we can open and close this thing and try to figure out why it's not going down all the way, but we'll get that figured out. It shouldn't be a big deal. Now I'm on a ladder looking up into the boot of the horizontal unload auger. We want to check the screen saver door, make sure it's functioning properly, and then we can get a good look at the outside of this auger, which it looks like it's pretty sharp and thin. So here we got the first inspection door off the unload auger. I'm gonna look in here. And you can see, it's hard to see on camera. I don't know if I can see how thin the vertical is, that there's actually a chunk missing at the end of the flighting. I know it's hard to see on camera, but it's definitely done for. And then we'll check the flighting on here. I mean, the beginning of the auger on this horizontal is usually the thickest part, and it's worn down pretty thin. So the end of the auger is where it usually wears down the most. So we'll check the second door and look at that. But while I was in here, I grab a hold of this auger and move it up and down and try to feel the slop in between the vertical auger and the horizontal auger, and it seems pretty tight. So I think we actually got our use out of that vertical auger before the splines wore out. We actually wore the flighting out first, and I think a big part of that is using that shut-off kit. So I took this other cover off here and verified that the end of this inner horizontal is really thin. So if this first auger needs replaced, then you know you got to go ahead and pull all three of them out of the tube, and we know the one on the end is bad. So it needs vertical and all the horizontal augers replaced, which is, you know, typical on these 8-class machines. I see a lot of flighting or spline wear, you know, anywhere between 800 to 1,000 separator hours. You'll notice you might start having some thin flighting or some spline wear. I wish they ran longer than that, but you know, they don't. So We just got to make sure that we check them and replace them when need be, because we don't want splines or, you know, auger failure out in the field. It's a lot easier to do it now than out in the field. All right, so that's going to do it on the inspection on the 780. It's not too bad. If we didn't have to do the verticals and the horizontals, it'd, you know, be very minor repairs to get this thing going again. But I hope you guys got something out of this video. If there's something else that you got questions on, or something else that you didn't see that you'd like me to cover, just, you know, comment below and I'll try to get back with you. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.